Minjun was the strongest dark mage in a parody Asgard, living at the mercy of a hot saintess until one day he decided to head back to Earth and become the strongest weeb in existence. But before this, while Minjun was still in Asgard, he visited the saintess with huge plots and demanded that she fulfill his final wish, now that he had eliminated every threat against her Sky land. This chick still hadn't had enough of him, so she tried to convince him to stay by buttering him up. But Minjun couldn't care less about being her lapdog anymore. In fact, he only cared about his beloved fried chicken and agreed to stay only if she could bring him that. Since the people in this world all had premature taste buds from consuming literal baby food all the time, she could only lie that she'd try her best. However, when Minjun demanded a gaming PC and an internet connection, her Stone Age brain realized even with magic, she was as useless as Sakura and could make him stay. Defeated, the Saintess told him to stand at the center of her summoning circle and release the protection seal from his hands, which was practically restricting him from attacking her. She also wondered why he was being dumb enough to throw away all the godly power he earned in this world, but Minjun simply told her to quit being a nosy. She sighed and moved on to the next step, which would render Minjun back to the weakling of a human he was. However, Minjun knew he was far too greedy to ever allow some weak chick to strip him of his hard-earned power, and quickly used his radioactive spider webs to choke her. He then yanked her away and opened a reverse isekai portal, leaving her shocked because one couldn't do it using dark magic. Minjun explained that whether it's light or dark, magic is magic, and once you reach the peak of dark magic, dimensional travel is literally child's play. Before leaving, Minjun gifted the controlling bitch's middle finger and vanished, leaving her alone to curse her luck. On the other hand, Minjun returns to Korea and instead of discarding his edgy Dark Lord cosplay, immediately picks up his long-forgotten phone. He logs into his favorite video game, only to discover there's no internet connection. Meanwhile, a group of military troops infiltrates the area where he lives, only to discover that the target they were chasing is the harmless Minjun. The troops charge at him suddenly and tell him to get down, making him wonder why there are military guys in a civilian area, without knowing that a wild beast is right behind him, ready to turn him into its breakfast. As soon as Minjun sees it, he decides to teach this cocky small fry a lesson but discovers he cannot use magic anymore. Still, it doesn't stop him from turning the weakling into a smashed hamburger patty, much to the soldier's horror. While he mansplains the beast about how scum like him couldn't even scratch him, he wonders what an Asgardian creature is doing in Korea. Later, the soldiers, who are scared shitless of this power show, take him away in their van and warn him about how his little stunt could have thrown him in jail had their commander not decided to let it slip. Minjun lies that he just returned from America, so he has no idea what's going on in Korea, and recalls when he was 7 years old, weird portals called dungeons appeared and spawned disgusting monsters. Evolved superhumans called the Awakened dealt with them just fine by joining the Hunter Corps, a special military division, which brings him to the real question. What in the world did these incompetent do or not do to have his precious game servers destroyed? He turns to the side character escorting him and asks whether landing jobs at gaming companies is still possible, only for the weird guy to flex his college grades instead. Eventually, he explains how 2 years ago, final boss-level demons started appearing and kicked their militaries so hard they couldn't recover, making Minjun wonder if this guy is deaf or just incredibly dumb. Since he cares more about his video games than this end-of-the-world sob story, Minjun gets even more cooked when he learns he'll have to enlist in the army soon. Right then, his phone rings with his enlistment notification, informing poor Minjun he'll be wasting his life on monsters instead of hot chicks starting tomorrow. This doesn't sit right with him, and he throws a tantrum about it. The poor soldier saves his ears and recommends that he head to the nearest PC room to check how true this is. Like a dream come true, he immediately heads to one and recalls his life before Asgard as a socially inept nerd who didn't have friends or parents, just some hand-me-down video games. However, he loved that life and had planned on continuing it, but now he had this whole demonic exorcism roleplay to carry out, which wouldn't have been a problem if he still had all his powers from Asgard. This realization hurts his god complex, and Minjun gaslights himself into using his brute strength to beat the absolute hell out of the demons in their sorry dungeons. The next day, he heads to the recruitment center, where some loudmouths call every one of the new recruits spineless weaklings, making Minjun realize just how nice they are compared to the Gordon Ramsay wannabes that trained him in Asgard. As the yapping ceremony starts, the battalion commander asks if any of them wants to join the Hunter Corps, which pays 3 times the salary of a regular military guinea pig, and Min-jun raises his hand. When he's called up to the stage, he flexes that he never skipped leg day and leaves everyone's mouth hanging wide open. This reminds Min-jun of how, back in his emo days in Asgard, he had to deal with 2 major troubles daily. 1, his rotten public image, and 2, the constant need to hunt monsters to replenish demonic energy. However, being the absolute genius that he is, Min-jun found the cheat code and raided dungeons to suck as much energy as he could from demonic minions, and eventually the ugly, stinky final bosses. Defeating the one with the highest demonic energy was how he reached his peak potential, until all of it was stolen from him for the sake of some plot twist. Back in the present, some old man asks him why he's stupid enough to join a literal death ring, when everyone else wants to avoid it at all costs. Although Min-jun jokes that he's just that masochistic, in reality, he wants to use the Hunter Corps to raid dungeons and defeat monsters with demonic energy, just to gain back his lost powers. While doing so, if he can manage to become a popular public image and bank tons of dollars, Min-jun believes he'll be able to commission his favorite video game. His Delulu is interrupted when the Hunter Corps surgeon, Sungo, shows up and demands to know whether Min-jun is messing around or actually is an awakened human. Although Min-jun wonders whether all the military guys are this constipated, he does as he's told to and opens a status window, only to discover an error, which completely throws off Sungo. Meanwhile, in another city, a chick called Yunseo meets up with an overbearing army commander and tells him to quit trying to lick her boots just because she's her celebrity father's daughter. He laughs and tells her to get off her high horse since he called her here to have a pep talk session. Unable to fathom the second-hand embarrassment, Yunseo burns deep red as the commander tells her how refreshing it is to see Nepo babies like her start from the bottom. Right then, Truck Kun stops at their facility, and the commander mentions the new funny recruit Yunseo might be getting as her colleague this year. On the other hand, this funny recruit, who happens to be Min-jun, eyes the $1 million facility, while the stingy Sungo keeps reminding him he ain't shit, hurting Min-jun's god complex. He then reveals he'll be personally testing his strength and points at a weird red rock, telling Min-jun to move it by at least an inch within 10 minutes. Turn out that this sneaky stone was stolen from one of the monster dungeons and is incredibly heavy. However, Min-jun's cocky believes he'll crush this test completely. Meanwhile, though Sungo believes Min-jun bootlicked his way into the military, the golden boy draws his wrists and crushes the heck out of the mineral, leaving both Sungo and the army commander, who is enjoying the scene with Yunseo from afar, dumbfounded. A few days later, some ugly weakling curses his fate for ending up in the Hunter Corps, saying he never imagined the training would be so hard. As he and some other idiots run up the infamous 6,000-step stairs with sandbags weighing them down, he curses Sungo for being a torture expert, only to redirect all this hatred toward Min-jun upon seeing how this crazy guy is simply running as if gravity doesn't exist. On the other hand, Min-jun's rock-bottom standards from Asgard make him wonder why people called Hunter Corps training difficult, on top of all the luxury uniforms, the healthy meals, and the personal time after 9 p.m. every night. Adding the PC rooms in the facility and the big bucks, Min-jun believes his shitty life couldn't have met a better miracle. High on this realization, Min-jun finishes the race within 20 minutes, much to Sungo's horror, who believes no one can complete it in less than an hour. His high on crack then harasses Sungo to give him the promised outing pass, which the tortured guy fails to decline. Later, Min-jun overhears his loser colleagues get all worked up over raising their stats by a single point and compares it to the 10s he had to raise by each day back in Asgard. Cursing his past, he turns to one of the guys and asks about the outing pass, only for all the fanboys to start pestering him about whether he was an MMA star in his previous life. This doesn't sit right with poor Min-jun, who was treated like some disgusting slime back in Asgard. Right then, someone mentions that the PC rooms are open now, and Min-jun goes completely feral. He calculates how even 2 hours of sleep would be a luxury compared to how sleep-deprived he used to be back in Asgard, and the others wonder if he's actually a god. The next day, another deathly marathon leaves the others gasping for their lives, while Min-jun's plot armor makes him immune to the need for oxygen. When his jealous comrades call him an absolute monster, he threatens to waste all their precious water and later feeds them, comparing their needy little loudmouths to bird chicks. Right then, the lieutenant rains on their parade and calls every one of them gutter shit and weak losers who can't run without breaking a sweat. Just as Min-jun wonders why he's acting so weird all of a sudden, He warns them about the upcoming dungeon adjustment training, hoping to scare the hell out of them. When this tactic works, he tries to calm their scaredy asses by bribing them with a vacation offer. However, only Min-jun stands as the one with any hope of winning this round, while the others lose their will to live when D-Day arrives, bringing the recruits to a live and functioning dungeon. It turns out that most dungeons disappear after all the demons inside them are wiped out. However, some of them stay and keep adjusting their internal structures, serving as a great learning environment for noobs like them. This one is one of these transformed dungeons too. However, before anyone can step into the dimension, a military truck arrives with a bunch of disgusting yet overpowered demonic hounds and leaves their mouths hanging. While everyone else almost shits their pants from this sight alone, Min-jun compares these rabid dogs to some cute little chihuahuas. Right then, the tone-deaf lieutenant reminds these pansies that they'll be facing real monsters in the future and can't lose it over every pair of fangs they see. He then explains how everyone will need to form a 4-man tag team to finish this round. To make sure their malnourished bodies don't get instantly crushed, they all get to wear an ugly set of ancient armor, which Min-jun believes they got at a Walmart sale. He asks the lieutenant if he can take it off once they finish this round, only to be called an arrogant jerk. The lieutenant further tells him this is a team round, so he can't just go off and clear it on his own, expecting to still rank at the top of the class. His dimwit, on the other hand, believes he just needs to teach his fellow nutcases how to kick some. However, when he tries to become their underpaid teacher, he realizes there are still some things he can't do, even with his MC Nepo card. Later, Min-jun's team becomes the first one to enter the dimension, and although everyone else gets wobbly legs from it, Min-jun is just happy he'll be able to take off this out-of-fashion armor sooner. It turns out that 2 of the lieutenant's sidekicks are hiding inside the dungeon, stalking the kids. Min-jun, on the other hand, senses the hounds approaching them, and though he wants to finish this round in a heartbeat, he believes his comrades need some battle experience too. He takes his time to relax his panicking colleagues and punches the beast right in the head, finishing him off in one go. When another dog starts ravaging his friend, Min-jun kicks him in the nuts and condemns him to hell too. He then delivers some lame speech about how they are more likely to get defeated if all they do is piss their pants, and that they need to take advantage of this 2-on-1 situation and whoop some demons for once. This pep talk works, and the weaklings start to fight back, leaving the instructors dumbfounded who previously believed Min-jun was just some loudmouth lucky bastard. One of them even suspects he's the reincarnation of their core surgeon, but the other says stuff like that only happens in K-dramas. Either way, since the hounds are defeated, these guys come out of hiding and tell the recruits they can leave the dungeon. Min-jun pesters them about whether he'll get the vacation pass or not. Just then, the ground begins to shake and Min-jun realizes that the transforming dungeon is changing its shape right about now, an event that closes off its entrance, leaving everyone locked inside. Even the tough jocks start panicking and try to reach their higher-ups on the radio, only in vain. One of them wonders why it's happening so soon when they should have had another month before this happened, but the other suggests they gaslight the kids first. Knowing full well it won't help, they tell the dumbasses they'll be able to leave the dungeon after an hour, and the idiots believe them, all except the Megamind, Min-jun. He suspects that the dungeon has turned into an enclosed dungeon, and though it would have been a disaster otherwise, it's nothing more than a glitch since he's here. On the other hand, the instructors banter among themselves as the clever one explains the situation to the academy backbencher and explains how they will need to defeat every monster in this dungeon to escape. Once they inform the recruits about this, and they turn into malfunctioning robots due to the panic, the instructor shits himself too upon realizing just how smoked he'd be without his equipment. He calculates that the best course of action would be to abuse the ugly protective sheets that the recruits are wearing and use them as bait, since these guys are practically useless either way, while the instructors would defeat the monsters. However, his lame moral compass gets in the way, and he refuses to do so. Meanwhile, Min-jun senses something weird, however, before he can explain anything. One of the instructors gets hit by some hidden entity and cries before succumbing to the ground. The other dumb guy rushes to his aid, only to meet the same fate, despite Min-jun's warnings. Min-jun uses this incident to instill fear into the others, asking them to stay back, while he takes off, despite the others warning him not to be a self-sabotaging maniac. Min-jun, on the other hand, realizes it was demonic energy that made the weak human faint and gets high on his drive to acquire it by all means necessary. As soon as he arrives at the source of it, he realizes it's a crystalline mine where he can suspiciously not sense any demonic presence. However, it doesn't take too long for him to pinpoint the final boss's location and realize it's the infamous Dark Hound, whom he first encountered back in Asgard and almost got whooped to his death. However, with his current level of power, he's just glad he's here to cure his homesickness and doesn't take 2 seconds to pound into his death. With the Hound down, he absorbs all the spilling demonic energy and explains how the venomous blood that would be an instant kill for weaklings, such as humans, doesn't even scratch dark mages like him. Still as happy as he is to finally devour the much-needed demon energy, Min-jun doesn't understand how a creature native to Asgard ended up in the human world. It only raises his suspicion when he recalls how clueless the instructors were when the dungeon changed dimensions and how he never read about demon energy in any of the Academy manuals. He assumes it's the plot Queen Saintess is doing since demon energy cannot travel dimensions on its own. However, being the OP top dog that he is, he shrugs it off. Meanwhile, the stupid wimps wake up after the party is over and ask if everyone is safe, only to learn that Min-jun's dimwit has gone off on its own. One of the instructors decides to kick him out of the military immediately for being so darn stupid, only to realize he's the one who fainted on his students like some world-class pansy and can't criticize Min-jun. Just then, the idiot returns with a life-size package of the dead demon and throws it at the losers to investigate. The others get brain rot from realizing Min-jun took out a literal menace, but are glad either way since the gate is now open. As the weaklings all escape, one of the instructors stops Min-jun, asking if he really took out the Hound on his own, and asks him to report the entire story to the lieutenant once they get out. He also whines about how useless he was throughout the session, and asks him to report that too, and though Min-jun completely agrees, he takes pity on him and refuses to be a rat. As the instructor leaves, Min-jun follows behind, only for his status window to open up on its own, stating that the error has been fixed. The window opens to reveal his freaky choice of names and how he is a total simp for the Riz Queen Lumi from his favorite video game, to the point that he used her name to get rid of all his fanboys back in Asgard, only for it backfire and kickstart a cult instead. He also realizes that his stats have significantly downgraded, and that only a measly low-rank skill is left in his arsenal that was once full of S-ranked assholes. This disappoints him, and he wonders if he is in some Kleich Daisuke novel right now. Later on, as news about the transformed dungeon, the incompetence of so-called instructors, and Min-jun's world-class power show makes waves, the recruits are all forced to stay in their rooms instead of being out and about on their promised field trips, much to their annoyance. However, some are more interested in the tea like true gossip queens, and wonder if Min-jun can ace his ranks now that he's proven to be better than their weak as hell superiors. Meanwhile, Min-jun is called to the commander's office, where he offers him a proposal in exchange for his services. While Min-jun's clueless, ugly face stares at him, the commander rejoices at how his long and tiring life has finally shown him the miracle of finding somebody as outstanding as Min-jun, and he realizes he cannot waste his talent by letting him stay with mediocre side characters. Once this is decided, this crackhead offers to let Min-jun take the advancement exams 2 years earlier than he legally can if he agrees to transfer to the most monster-infested city in Korea. Min-jun stays quiet and calculates that even though these conditions appear harsh for weaklings, he isn't one of them. In fact, more monsters means more demon energy for him. Plus, getting the offer to advance as the cherry on top just means he'll get promoted at lightning speed, which is just what he needs. With this, he agrees to the offer, leaving the commander surprised. Later, as the others are leaving, they question Min-jun's obviously dumb life choices and wonder if this insane life goal is to reach his peak prowess 100 times over. He says reaching peak power is for weaklings like them, but for him, it's something even greater, which is to play video games in peace one day. Once they all leave and Min-jun is left on his own, a loud truck makes its debut and a shredded guy called Minji steps out and shows off his unparalleled tap dance skills. As he later escorts him to his new base, Min-jun realizes that he neither fears monsters nor the harsh weather, but the bullying he might face when he gets there and cause him to beat his uncultured seniors to the pulp, something they'll instantly deport him from the military. Soon, they reach the base and Munji shoves him into a room full of seniors. 2 idiots with bad hair dyes instantly take a liking to him and recognize him as the super soldier who has been making waves. Min-jun wonders if these are the dormitory's self-proclaimed alphas. They ask why he chose this hellhole of all places, and Minjun says it's because he can advance faster over here, which unexpectedly wins them over. One of them asks whether Minjun has a girlfriend, only to learn he has only clapped 2D chicks in his head, which amuses them further. They then demand to see his hidden talent, and Minjun claims he can do one-finger push-ups. The guys get annoyed because even they can pull it off, only for Minjun to blow them away by doing vertical push-ups instead. Right then, Sungho shows up with his ugly face and constipated aura. Surprisingly, however, the crackhead pair begins to bully the exhausted guy instead, asking why his arrogant is the one that's tired after a 3-day vacation. Sungho tells them to get lost, and they finally leave after showing him some ninja hand signs, much to Minjun's relief. Meanwhile, Sungho settles down and begins scrolling through his boring Instagram feed before asking Dongjin, Minjun's direct superior, to show him the ropes. Dongjin offers to buy him some treats at the military convenience store, and although he warns him about his big appetite, Dongjin doesn't learn his lesson until Minjun brings half the store for him to buy. After recovering from this wallet-emptying scam, Dongjin takes him to a cafe and reveals that here gyms and PC rooms are only open for corporals and above. It sucks Minjun's soul out, and he asks what he needs to do to change that. Dongjin states he needs to be at least a surgeon to even attempt something, and Minjun wonders if he should just flip now that these losers have crossed the line by restricting the PCs. Meanwhile, Dongjin begins his sob story about how he has flunked the advancement exams for 3 years in a row, when some Dachebag interrupts their trauma bonding and calls him the eternal private first class. This guy is Guangxik, the infamous Dongjin bully who Minjun believes needs a better barber. As he settles and begins devouring Minjun's hard-earned food, he yaps about how the two of them will become smoked beef if they are useless during the firearms training tomorrow. Dongjin mentions that he hasn't told Minjun about the training, yet after which Guangxik begins to trash-talk him, ridiculing how he's the patron saint of uselessness. This gets on Minjun's overly sensitive nerves, and he uses his third-grade corruption skill to trigger his guts, threatening a bout of explosion. As Guangxik sprints to the bathroom to save his non-existent dignity, Dongjin explains how OP the bullets are in their facility, compared to the ones Minjun has been trained with at the recruitment center. He compares them to ponies and wild stallions, making Minjun wonder if the ones he used in Asgard are elephants on steroids. The next day, Minjun lands 19 out of 20 bullets at the bullseye, surprising everyone else since such a score is impossible. The dumb duo assumes it was dumb luck, but Minji tells them to shut up. He also invites Minjun to the special firearms training they'll hold later, only for the stupid duo to make fun of Minji for being biased toward the lucky newbie. Dongjin is just as surprised and admits he didn't expect him to have such a broken skill, and later explains how the special firearms training works. You basically enter a training facility with another competitor, and you two cross 2 different routes infested with monsters, defeating them and reaching the finishing line. On top of having real, moving monster targets, you have to keep an eye out for civilians and avoid shooting them. Although Dongjin reassures him he'll be fine since instructors will be on guard all around him. This adrenaline junkie is only thrilled to finally face real opponents instead of dartboards. Sometime later, as Dongjin once again fangirls over Minjun's 19 hits, the humble boy praises his 13 hits, only for him to blush and mention how Sungho is the real deal in their squad as he easily hits at least 17 marks daily. Minjun humbly wonders if 17 is as good as they get and asks Dongjin if he'll be his partner during the special training. He says it isn't set in stone since partners are determined through a round of lotto. When the training begins, Minjun is instantly thrown off to learn his partner would be Guangxik. This arrogant jerk tells Minjun he is completely out of his league and wouldn't be able to finish his round in less than 3 minutes, which is the average squad time. Minjun only rolls his eyes at him and watches the ones before them closely. On Minji's orders, 2 weak-looking, ugly sergeants get in line and enter the elevators, descending to an underground route where monsters await them. Meanwhile, the others watch their progress on a screen where Minjun notices the difference in the size of the monster symbols, only for Guangxik to give him free lessons on how a bigger size represents a bigger threat. As if this Sherlock wasn't obvious enough, he goes on to explain how 2 monster symbols mean they have to fight 2 monsters before they get to press the finishing buzzer. Meanwhile, as one of the 2 sergeants deals with a giant toad for his opponent, the other faces a measly mouse, assuming he'll get an easy win, only to find a giant, deadly centipede in his next round. The other one quickly finishes after whooping 2 toads in a row, winning the round. The other one shows up later, stinking as bad as the huge worm's dirty fluids. As they banter over who would treat whom to a meal, Minjun proposes they make a bet too, which Gwangshik agrees with. However, this broke loser demands Minjun's 3-month salary, which Minjun agrees with after realizing how shallow he is. As the game begins, Minjun descends into the elevator and unknowingly begins to leak his overpowered mana over being provoked by a weakling like Gwangshik. On the other hand, as the other surgeons poke fun at Minjun for being cocky enough to make a bet with Gwangshik, an earthquake hits them, and they realize that the second monster in Minjun's path is heading toward the first one, which at the same time makes its dashing debut before a surprised Minjun. He realizes it is just a bigger, horned version of Mike Wazowski, who's eating the other flimsy rat. Seeing Minjun's apathetic expression triggers him and he eats the rat at him, which the ex-Dark Lord easily dodges. While he does so, Minjun recalls that tonight's dinner is his beloved fried chicken, and he decides to finish the match as soon as possible. The only problem is the humanoid cardboard figures that he needs to avoid hitting. Just then, Mike Wazoshi pulls his fist at Minjun, making him wonder whether he's rampaging because it's that time of the month for him. Either way, he pulls one at him too, and as their fists collide, the lizard's arm gets shredded. Just as it yells, Minjun prepares to finish him off in one more attack, only to find that this guy's trump card is regeneration and shape-shifting. On the other hand, as all the soldiers panic over what's going on with Minjun, Minji realizes that the badass in that chamber is Cyclops, who regenerates and gets a power amp whenever he gets hit by an energy source. He also realizes that the fishy thing about this whole plot twist is that Cyclops never attacks unless something provokes him. However, he can't figure out what's with his low IQ. Meanwhile, after dodging the lizard's charges, Minjun pulls the trigger to practice his firearms, blasting both his eyes in the process. He tries to use this chance to finish him off, only to discover that this sucker can sense his presence even without his eyes, and barely dodges being sliced in two. The lizard tries to pounce him to the ground only for Minjun to easily tank his attack. As he rises from the boulders, Minjun releases his demon aura for aesthetics and realizes that the lizard is reacting to his demon energy. Meanwhile, Minji enters the chamber with a portable cannon and rushes in to save Minjun. On the other hand, Gwangshik with his $2 haircut rushes to the finishing line, daydreaming about where he'll be spending Minjun's salary, only to find him standing at the finish line already. Minjun gives him a Sasuke-style smug grin as he presses the buzzer, making him sweat his brains out. Meanwhile, Minji discovers that the lizard has been smoked to death by none other than Minjun. Later, as he rises to celebrity status after defeating Cyclops and finishing in less than 2 minutes, Dongjin approaches him to make sure he's okay, only for Minjun to credit him as the guru who made him so strong while Gwangshik eats his words. However, he flips out instantly when someone mentions their bet and beats him to a pulp, whining about how it wasn't fair for him to face 2 monsters while Minjun faced only one. As everyone rolls their eyes at his weak debate, he turns to bully Dongjin into siding with him, which Minjun doesn't like. However, before he tries anything rash to shut him up, Sungo shows up and practically defends him by calling him a shameless, weak loser who cannot accept that he got smoked by a newbie, who faced a way bigger challenge than him. As Wangshik's previously fiery aura turns to steam, he meekly asks Sungo not to embarrass him in front of the kids, only for Sungo to boast how nice it is to abuse his rank against a shithead like him, who once bullied him the same way, only to blow his fuse completely. Seeing how he's fuming with rage, Sungo wonders if his disgusting mouth still has something to spit, only for the weakling to say he doesn't, and the Riz King walks on. Later, Dongjin explains to Minjun that Sungo got a 2-rank promotion after he scored the highest grade in the advancement exams and subsequently ranked higher than his previous superiors such as Gwangshik. Sadly, however, this offer no longer exists because some incompetent idiot flunked a mission badly after receiving the promotion. Disappointed, Minjun wonders if there's really no way to get promoted anymore, but Dongjin explains one can if they rescue a civilian or do something completely badass for the greater good. However, in most cases, it's highly luck-based. Minjun, who believes he is highly deficient in the luck department, prays that a flock of monsters would just show up right here and then, only for his daydream to come true instantly. The broadcasting speakers announce an emergency alert that fire-spitting demons called middle bats have shown up near the oil reserves, which might turn into a disaster if they set the entire facility on fire. Assuming that good luck is just one of his many superpowers in this world, Min-jun instantly takes off. On the other hand, the measly soldiers at the reserve site debate whether to shoot the bats or wait for reinforcements so they can put up a barrier, but their dumb brains fail to come to a decision. That's when Min-jun shows up like their knight in shining armor and tells them he'll be the bait. The guys instantly recognize him as the self-proclaimed top dog, but reprimand him for not wearing any equipment. Min-jun's cocky ass, however, ignores the side characters and focuses on the bats that'll help him advance. He then starts infusing his demon energy and notices the bats are reacting exactly as Mike Wazowski did. Just as he unleashes hell upon the demons, his useless colleagues arrive with the barrier equipment, along with Sungo, and though they are stunned to see Min-jun's reckless stunt, Sungo tells them to have some shame and assist him. Just as Min-jun is dealing with even more bats, he realizes how exhausting it is to take them out individually. Right then, Sungo charges at him, calling him a dumb freak who's here without a bulletproof vest, only for Min-jun to give him instant diarrhea and borrow his electric baton. As he charges it up, Min-jun instantly starts feeling like Thor, which makes sense because he comes from Asgard. High on this new delulu, he smashes and fries the bats one by one while Sungo watches him in awe. Right then, a sneaky demon slides above the others and prepares to fire at the reservoir, which makes the others panic and almost open fire, only for Min-jun to jump at it and remind it who's the boss here. As this bat gets barbecued, the protective sheath gets installed around the oil fields and the wimpy commander finally shows up. He asks Sungo who smoked all these stinky bats, only to learn that all the tearing apart, smoking, and smashing was done by a single person, which the commander doesn't believe is possible. However, as Min-jun shows up with Sungo's broken baton, wondering if he would need to repay for this, the commander finally believes him. The next day, the commander interrogates him and asks if he re-enlisted or is Benjamin Button, both of which Min-jun denies. He then lectures him about never trying something as stupid ever again, just because his dumb luck helped him make it out alive once. As Min-jun stays quiet, he goes on to explain how the military has very few battalions and recruits each year, especially in the Hunter Corps, and reveals that it's because every one of them is awakened, whether it's a soldier or an intelligence officer. Min-jun, who is rather bored of this pep talk, recalls how they expected to be promoted rather than lectured, something that the commander catches up on. He smirks and tells him to dream on, leaving him stunned. Later, the toughest jock in the unit with the highest body count shows up at the battalion unit in his fancy car, wearing his fancy uniform. As soon as he steps inside, all the sergeants and commanders alike start pissing their pants from his Chad aura alone, including Sungo, who even gets praised for handling the bat situation as calmly as he did. Min-jun, who is standing right behind him, wonders what kind of a guy he is, only for the tough guy to turn right around and recognize him. He grips his hand for a handshake and slaps his back, telling everyone to quit being so stuck up around him. Later, he investigates the origins of the middle bats, only to learn that they came from a nearby hill and weren't detected on their radar until after they were very close to the reservoir. The wimpy sergeant explains that their equipment wasn't malfunctioning, which the jock finds sus and tells them to install more cameras. Finally, he turns to Min-jun and after praising his John Wick moves, asks him whether he thinks he should have been more careful. Min-jun apologizes for acting like the hero he was obviously born to play, only for the jock to say he was just kidding. He then pulls his name tag and replaces it with a newer one, raising his rank to private first class. On top of it all, he tells the commander to let him off on a vacation for a few days, an idea that makes him the happiest. Like a pro-weeb, this cultured guy heads straight to a PC room when his vacation starts, only for a conversation between two bystanders to get his attention instead. They discuss how stingy the army brats are acting about letting civilians into a restricted area that smells pretty rotten and gives headaches to those who wander close by. Since the symptoms are reminiscent of exposure to demon energy, Min-jun can't help but ask where this place is. Later, being the power-greedy bastard that he is, he hitchhikes to the venue and realizes that it is loaded with demonic energy, which instantly pumps him up. He uses his ultimate diarrhea move to trespass in the face of all the security and enters the dungeon emitting all the energy. Since he doesn't see any ugly freaks inside it yet, he begins by absorbing the raw energy, which increases his stats significantly and gives him new power moves. One of these power moves is the special skill of summoning a shadowy familiar called the Night Walker, who Min-jun used quite often back in Asgard for mostly assassination. However, when he summons him this time, a pipsqueak shows up instead of the hefty giant he was expecting. Sometime later, as he returns to the military base, Minjun discovers he has elevated to the level of a local celebrity. When he finds Dongjin, he hands him a souvenir. This gesture is mocked by the most mockable dude of all time, who walks in wondering if Minjun has brought him the spicy magazine he wanted, only to learn that he mistook it for a coffee brand and brought him that instead. As he leaves with his sorry expression, the two dumb idiots show up and reveal that they just saw Minjun's name on the advancement exam list, which makes everyone wonder how that could be possible. Minjun reveals this is his biggest pull ever since he basically got transferred to this hellhole in exchange for early advancement, making everyone wonder how crazy it'll be for him to advance to the corporal rank, right after landing first class. As they all start fangirling over him, Winechick rots in a corner and Minjun learns about the specialty weapon training that is due the following day. The day arrives sooner than expected and begins with an orientation regarding the advancement exam, which Minjun learns consists of two parts, a written and a practical exam. As the training starts, the Lodnoth instructor tells all the privates and private first-class soldiers to pick their swords. He then demonstrates some flashy dance moves, and as everyone, including Minjun, copies him, he realizes that Asgardian swordsmanship might be better. Using plot armor, Minjun instantly masters the stance and skill, making the instructor call him up on stage and leaving everyone else dumbfounded. Minjun's arrogance makes him believe he's about to receive yet another honor, only to become an unpaid teacher to his fellow colleagues. While he teaches them in the instructor's stead, he chills around and later pays him back with a cheap chocolate biscuit. Later, as he takes a break, Dongjin comes up to him and after admiring how cool he looks with his sword, asks him to observe his swordsmanship later, leaving him genuinely surprised. He instantly agrees and after noticing his flashy moves, realizes that he doesn't lack skills but confidence, the one thing that Minjun himself has plenty of. He also realizes this guy is a complete waste of potential and swears to turn him into a formidable hunter in the future, whenever the right time comes. Soon enough, the day of the advancement exam arrives and Minjun gets all set to become a corporal. Lieutenant Chulman greets the battalion and takes them to the site of the exam on a bus. On the bus, some jerks discuss how the battalion of all girls will also be joining the exam, and one of them even plans to show off his ugly, weak moves to impress them. Minjun, on the other hand, knows that they lack the riz needed to clap hotcakes, and tells them to try their best. When the written exam ends, the only one who becomes a laughingstock is the one who wanted to show off his non-existent riz. As Minjun chuckles from overhearing this, Hanseo, the hot chick from before, watches him closely. Next up, the practical exam begins with a yapping session from some old hag who eventually mentions how Minjun and Hanseo are the only two contenders who have entered the exam on exceptional ground. This stirs some debate and backbiting among the other participants. Hanseo, on the other hand, glances back with a flirtatious gaze and blushes when Minjun's eyes meet hers, making him wonder if she took her daily pills today. The next exam begins soon enough, and the participants are assigned the task to push a giant meatloaf from the center of the rim to the back. Depending on how far back he is moved, the examinee would receive a certain set of points. The lack of creativity reminds Minjun of the crystal rock test, and he sighs at how dumb and basic all of this is. As the exam commences, a shredded jock comes up and tries to push the gorilla back, only to be kicked in the nuts instead and end up with 0 points. The next few losers meet the same fate until it's Unseo's turn. She pushes the big show back by 5 meters and clears the round, forming an instant simp club for herself. However, the only one she eyes is Minjun, who is clueless about who she really is. When it's finally Minjun's turn, he decides he won't be punching and subsequently sending the guy to heaven. Instead, he'll just focus on getting his points. With one strong shove and push, the gorilla ends up out of bounds and barely stays grounded on his feet. On the other hand, as Minjun receives a perfect 100, Yunseo can't help but stare at him from afar. A few more losers learn their place after Minjun breaks the scoring scale, and the winners proceed to the agility test, for which the instructors instantly bring in weird equipment. It turns out that this round of insanity requires them to dodge bullets, albeit those made of rubber, for a whole minute. The instructors further explain that even if one doesn't dodge a bullet, as long as they can bear the hit for the given time, they will still proceed to the next round. As the exam commences, Dongjin shows up to greet Minjun, much to his surprise since he had expected such a weakling to have failed the strength test already. He reads his mind and explains that the reason why he hasn't been getting promoted isn't because he can't pass the tests, but because passing scores for him are higher than they are for those with lower ranks. Dongjin also warns Minjun about the upcoming bullets, just as one of the contenders drags his wimpy ass away after a severe head injury. As more and more examinees keep flunking, the instructor gets frustrated and rants about how weak this batch of privates is compared to the surgeons advancing right next door. To change the pace of the game, Nunso becomes the next contender and begins by stretching her long, thick legs before getting into position. She easily dodges all the bullets and receives a perfect score, only to later piss off Minjun by glaring at him once more. Just as he wonders what's wrong with this high-on-crack, he gets called to the ring. The first bullet comes for his face, which he dodges, much to Unseo's surprise, and he swears to make the difference between their talents painfully visible to her. As the following bullets approach Minjun, he puts his hands in his pockets and does a reverse moonwalk while dodging the bullets perfectly, making everyone's jaws hang in awe. He even mocks Unseo with his smug, ugly face and clears the round with flying colors, leaving even the instructors dumbfounded. The next stage commences in front of a weird transforming dungeon, which examinees are required to march right into, get their hands stamped, and run right out within a span of 40 minutes. The only catch was that no one knew where to get their hands stamped from. Minjun, like the others, worries about its location. While he's busy contemplating whether he should choose violence if no one else will, Unseo slides right past him with another one of her glares, making his dumbass finally realize that she's challenging him with her hard eyes. As he completely loses it over this, Minjun sprints right after her, and once he matches her speed, he says there isn't much to her except arrogance before overtaking her. Unseo tries to decode what he just spitted, only to fail and feel even more pissed. This reminds her of her personal life at the all-girls shelter where she receives princess treatment thanks to her Nepo card, whereas, behind her back, everyone just talks about how she doesn't live up to their she-must-be-a-bitch expectations. At the academy, Unseo and her team kept winning battle after battle, and she got raised to the celebrity level, only for Minjun to break all the records she kept setting in the day. Eventually, the same girls who once only talked about Unseo couldn't stop talking about him. This obviously broke her heart, because it went against her plan of making her beloved father proud by becoming the strongest, and she couldn't help but request getting posted at the same battalion site as Minjun following the end of the recruitment training. Back in the present, as Unseo curses herself for being petty, and realizes she's been doing all of this because she's jealous, she turns as red as a tomato and swears to herself she'll apologize to Minjun for acting like a pick-me girl, as she only wants to become strong, not the goat. However, just as she reaches the stamping site, she finds that Minjun is already there. He mocks her with his ugly grin and calls her a snail before sprinting away, and leaving her even more pissed than before, even with his grade school-level insults. With this, she discards the idea of an apology and swears to defeat him. Meanwhile, though Minjun finishes the dungeon in about 20 minutes only, Unseo falls closely behind. Later, the instructor comes up to Minjun and praises him for getting perfect scores on all the tests, as the advancement exams conclude for good. As everyone begins to leave, Unseo picks up her jacket only for her eyes to meet Minjun's. This makes him stick his tongue out at her in a disgusting way, to which Unseo sighs and admits defeat, before putting on her uniform too and following closely behind. The next round begins at another facility with Dongjin standing in the midst of some crackhead, ugly demons. As they yell at the poor man with their tone-deaf voice, he shuts them up with his sword. Right afterward, a pair of lizards charges at Dongjin at once, only for him to kick one of them in the nuts and slice through the other one in a heartbeat. However, these annoying clowns don't go down just yet. Meanwhile, Minjun watches him from the mezzanine and recalls how during the show-off round, Dongjin got the highest score thanks to his stick-to-the-rules approach. However, since he is a weakling underneath all that, he is struggling to kick ass now that a real enemy is facing him. As the game continues, Dongjin's pantsy self struggles to stab the goblins and barely finishes the round in over 7 minutes, and Minjun realizes he isn't just weak, but also a total and absolute wimp. As Dongjin's insecure aura returns past his vibrant god complex, Minjun swears to rip him to shreds and rebuild him once he becomes a corporal. As he himself steps into the rim, he shocks the audience with his freaky choice of weapon, a spiked bat. Even the referee believes he's going to get whooped with such a useless weapon. However, Minjun, with all the cockiness in the world, slices through all 3 lizards at once with the same useless weapon. As the crowds go wild, he mocks Unseo even more and proudly stands like the greatest showman of all time. As the exam concludes, Minjun receives the much-needed promotion and becomes a literal local hero. While he's being praised, he notices Dongjin's droopy eyes from not being promoted and swears to turn him into a beast in no time. As they get back on the bus to return, Unseo shows up all flustered in hopes of apologizing to Minjun, only for this eternal virgin to misunderstand and warn her about provoking him again, instantly throwing her off. Later, as the bus full of losers takes off, all the chick-repellent virgins ask Minjun about what's up between him and Unseo, judging by how she was totally trying to get her peaches clapped just moments ago and was even rizzing him up during the tournament. This dumb geek, who'd rather clap a PC monitor than an actual chick, says he just trampled on her a little bit because she was provoking him, making all the others lash out at him for messing with the only hottie in a room full of potatoes. Minjun states she isn't his dream girl, but Lumi is, and being a total Sigma, he's going to stay loyal. Just as all the uncultured swine wonder what that is, he states she's the queen of two-dimensional plots, making them roll their eyes. Later, as they return to the dormitory, their lieutenant throws a fried chicken party to celebrate Minjun's historic feat, and everyone starts expecting he'd get promoted to sergeant rank in a heartbeat. Just then, Sungho shows up with a crate full of beers and tells his squad members to gather at the lounge immediately for their reports. The idiot duo notices the booze and almost attacks it, only for Sungho to give them the bombastic side eye and leave, stating that it's a gift to Minjun. Later, Minjun sneaks out and summons his cute little familiar, who starts playing around with the fly while Minjun forms his master scheme to use his small size and ability to gather information. He finally turns to the little guy and tells him to follow any high-ranking guy and gather any info related to a newsworthy or weird demonic occurrence. However, the capitalist Timon refuses to move an inch without his demon currency, aka demon energy, and Minjun immediately grants his wish. As the dumb being sprints off, Minjun second-guesses his choice to trust him, only for his thoughts to get interrupted by Sungho. He asks what Minjun is doing here, and he role-plays a dumb drunk idiot, despite having the advantage of never getting drunk or poisoned as a dark mage. Sungho gets tricked easily and heads back inside, making Minjun breathe a sigh of relief while realizing how by the book this guy is and how he doesn't really dislike him. The next day, the lieutenant and the commander both fangirl over how cool Minjun was during the last exam and can't help but admit how he has far exceeded their expectations, adding the fact that he's also the one who took down the middle bats and the one who became a corporal within less than a month. The commander fears that once the entire Hunter Corps knows him, which is inevitable, the Special Brigade Force might take interest in him, which is basically the Illuminati division of the Corps. Although the lieutenant believes Minjun might not be ready for that yet, the commander states he's more than ready and might end up standing in the Hall of Fame soon enough with the other legends. On the other hand, Minjun, with his heavy god complex, faces a bunch of cartoons in a simulation lab with his spiked baseball bat. On the night before, after finishing his secret session with his familiar, Minjun returns to the dorm with all the weaklings clinging to dear life after getting wasted. One of them is surprised to see Minjun all sober and in his senses and wonders if he's actually a god in a human's clothing. However, he isn't the only one, as the muscle god Sungho is just as sober and credits his post-drinking workout session for it. Minjun internally simps for his upright morals and muscles, as Sungho advises him to go to the military gym right away, now that he has free access to it. Back in the present, he takes Sungho's advice and decides to use the VR system, for which he heads to the expensive-looking gym. After messing around with the controller, he arrogantly tries to summon as many orcs as possible, only to be disappointed to find that 30 is the maximum number. He decides to take it either way and feels excited like a 4-year-old about getting the option to choose a weapon. After all his fetishes are satisfied, he ends up in a desert simulation and waits for the orcs to show up. When they do, he starts blasting them one by one while his weeb ass praises the wonders of technology. It takes him only a few minutes to finish them all, which is why, in the next round, he maxes out on all the creatures available. As the new and improved monster hunt begins, Minjun's sanity goes on a vacation, and he beats the absolute crap out of the lizards and the uglier versions of Shrek. As the simulation terminates with his victory, Minjun puts this insane VR system on the pedestal right under his video games and finds that his AP has increased. As he giddily leaves the gym, he finds Dongjun standing right outside with his dumb as hell face hanging in awe. Minjun realizes that his scheme got leaked by the stupid screen at the door as Dongjun finally asks if he really defeated all the 120 monsters he summoned. Unable to find an answer, he chooses the political approach and invites him to have a little chat with him. Meanwhile, Guangxik's shitty face can't believe what Minjun has achieved as he stares at the same screen a moment later. The following day, he visits the dormitory where he finds a bunch of losers chatting like gossip queens but can't see Minjun anywhere. He asks one of the side characters there about his whereabouts, and after this weakling flexes Minjun's higher rank in front of the ex-top dog, he sprints off to find him. Guangxik's lonely self brings him to chat with the others, and they reveal that their current favorite pastime is none other than Minjun, and they are betting their salaries on how long it'll take for that bastard to become a surgeon. The guy with the worst hair dye in history mocks the guy with the worst hairstyle over betting on only 6 months. While these two banter, Guangxik scribbles something on the paper, only for them to later discover he has hopped on the bandwagon and placed a bet on 1 month. Meanwhile, Minjun uses the aesthetically pleasing gym equipment to flex his godly muscles. As if fan service wasn't enough, he later whines about how his stats aren't increasing and wonders why a skill called Return of the Strength doesn't exist. Right then, his stat window opens up to reveal that the gods of stats have heard him and given him a raise. Right then, the underling from before shows up and informs him he's being called to the commander's office, only for Minjun's cash register eyes to pop up, making him wonder what kind of Sharingan that is. Minjun arrives at the commander's office to see his high on serotonin lieutenant, who praises him on the promotion for the umpteenth time, and later hands him a certificate of honor for his perfect score on the test and other protagonist-worthy achievements. Completely sold at this basic gesture, Minjun's childish mind asks him if he receives 10 of these awards, will he be able to get another exception and ascend the sergeant ladder, only for the lieutenant to laugh it off without popping his Delulu bubble. A few days later, Minjun heads off with his platoon on the mission to clear a dungeon, this time a monster rat's nest aka a sewer. This flavor of dungeons, despite not being particularly dangerous, tops the list of disgusting things. Once the troops are in, they decide to lure the 200 mice this dungeon has into one spot, using a disgusting, rotten banana. On the other hand, Sunggo finds rat and human bones splattered all over the place and questions his entire existence. However, right before he mentions this to anyone, a swarm of monster rats comes rushing towards them, and everyone is forced into action. As the lieutenant orders the privates to fall back immediately, the corporals make bets over who will kill more rats. After some more yelling and talk no jutsu sessions, the sprinting rats finally attack them, only for the soldiers to slash and smash them to the ground. Minjun, in particular, feels excited over this Call of Duty aesthetic and almost gets distracted by the cool moves of his colleagues. However, just when the nasty rats believe they've got him, he smashes their heads with his baseball bat, all the while simping for Minji and Schulman's baddest fighting style. On top of it all, Minjun feels proud of his beloved student Dongjun, whose fighting is on par with the others, if not better, something that Guangxik finds difficult to digest thanks to his arrogance. However, just when the situation seems to be under control, another swarm of rats rushes in through the back and divides the 4 battalions into groups of 2. The soldiers take good care of it, but just as they believe this is over, Minjun's nose smells the upcoming plot twist and realizes that there's some thick, tasty demon energy here. However, before he can pinpoint the location of the source, the ground beneath Guangxik splits open, and the other soldiers get yeeted away as a literal gym rat emerges, making everyone else feel insecure about their lousy physique. That's when Sunggo realizes that the bones he found earlier were proof that this guy was feeding on the lesser rats, like a typical sewer capitalist. Meanwhile, Guangxik's death flashes before his eyes as paralysis hits both him and the lieutenant, and they fail to move an inch away from the rat as he launches his first attack. However, the ex-bad boy's wimpy ass gets rescued by Dongjun, his ex-puppy in the nick of time, but only partly. As Dongjun loses his sword and realizes they are both dead meat, Minjun jumps through the ceiling to rescue his princesses, and Detroit smashes the absolute hell out of this rat. After earning the title of One Punch Man with hair, he praises Dongjun for his gutsy move and waits for the monster to get back up. As soon as he does, he punches the ground to match Minjun's freak, only to provide him a cover from the others to freely annihilate him and absorb all its demon energy. It takes only 3 super cool consecutive punches from Minjun to knock him out as dust rises all around them from the fallen ceiling spikes. With him down, Minjun absorbs every last bit of his demon energy and promises to use it for a good cause. As the dungeon finally gets defeated, the Bad Hair Bros settle their debate while Chulman contacts the military base to report the incident and ask for their assistance. Meanwhile, Minjun realizes he stinks as if water hasn't touched him in 200 years. Just as he curses his bad luck, the guy with the bad hairstyle approaches him and thanks him for saving all of their sorry asses. Playing the good guy that he definitely isn't, Minjun apologizes for rushing in without orders, but the sergeant says that if he hadn't done so, both Guangxik and Dongjin would have become rat dinner. Minji later confirms that none of the members have suffered anything more than some minor injuries, much to Chulman's relief. The tough guy later tells the entire troop to pack up and return home, and that they are abandoning the rest of the mission. Later, as they return to the base, Chulman asks Minjun to prepare a report about how he defeated the final boss, only for him to wonder if he should just mention he did it with his fists, after all when his useless shield didn't work. Chulman notices his struggle and mentions that although he couldn't see it clearly, he wonders if Minjun defeated the rat with his fists alone, which Minjun doesn't deny. Shocked, he asks about his stats, only to learn his strength and agility are over 60, compared to the 40-something that lieutenants and commanders usually have. Chulman has a mini-depressive episode, as he wonders why a guy as golden as him didn't go to the hunter school, and he thanks Minjun for saving the entire troop, and also his measly job. Although Minjun stays humble and says it was just his duty, in reality, his evil inner voice knows he did it to quench his power-hungry thirst, and not for some greater good bullshit. The following day, Minjun witnesses the biggest plot twist of all time as Guangxik of all people visits the gym and asks to be mentored by him, along with Dongjin. Minjun smells his bullshit from afar and reminds him they won't just let him in after all the hell he gave Dongjin, and he instantly throws his self-esteem in the garbage and apologizes to him. Even if this instantly convinces the good guy Dongjin to let him in, Minjun isn't satisfied with just a half-assed apology and decides to teach him the lesson of a lifetime. He tells Guangxik to act like a pigeon around them for the next 24 hours if he wants to join them, and though he wanted to repel them away by saying so, this guy with zero self-respect immediately starts cooing, blessing Minjun with eternal happiness. Meanwhile, back in Asgard, a buff minion drags a heavy trolley to the hot saintess and asks for how long she plans on keeping up her psychotic spree. She says she has no idea and summons a magic circle, teleporting the beast inside the trolley to where Minjun is, revealing that she's just throwing a tantrum after he refused to clap her and rejected her. On the other hand, the troops do some heavy, useless digging at a construction site and wonder if this will ever help them in life or stay as useless as math equations. Just then, a heavy truck arrives with some stone-metal hybrid bricks called Stettel, and Guangxik cries over how dense and heavy each of these is as he barely holds one of them with both hands. Just then, Minjun shows up like his worst nightmare, holding two with surprising ease, and continues to make everyone's jaws drop when he holds a bunch of them together without breaking a sweat. Later, after Minji allows everyone a breather, he tells Chulman that a tin-can dungeon has sprouted nearby, which shocks everyone. The two clowns beg Minji to not send them there, and he tells them to calm their weak nuts, while Minjun wonders what this is all about. Guangxik notices this, and as he smirks at his misery like the saddest he is, he recalls how tin-can dungeons are bigger than regular ones and carry more monsters on average, but without any boss, which makes them the perfect learning environment for students. As he finishes his yapping session, Minjun asks for the umpteenth time who in the world he keeps talking to, which shuts him up with embarrassment. The overpowered ex-lord, on the other hand, initially believes he doesn't need such kindergarten-level training right now, but as soon as he hears he can multiply his accomplishments with this, his greed pumps him up. However, his delulu about his upcoming promotions gets interrupted when his shadow familiar pops out of nowhere and Minjun barely hides it with his foot, while the clowns continue their intimacy session with Minji. He later turns to the familiar to learn that a strange dungeon with an irregular monster has appeared somewhere, and has been causing people to lose consciousness. Knowing full well that this means more demon energy, he turns on his demon mode and decides to take a day off. When Chulman hears of him leaving, he asks Minjun where he stayed the last time he had his vacation. Like a true gamer, he says he stayed in a PC room, which throws Chulman into a fatherly rage episode, and he hands him the keys to his parents' apartment. suggesting that he stay there. After some reluctance, Minjun accepts his charity while Chulman returns to his room and worries about Minjun's missing parents. Later, after crashing at the generous guy's place, he puts on his edgy hoodie and heads out on his self-assigned mission. After taking a crime drama-themed walk, he finds a military checkpoint, which he evades via the classic rooftop room. As he continues his James Bond play, Minjun soon discovers the portal and curses his useless sidekick for not discovering what kind of monster awaits him inside. Shrugging it off, he still walks in, only to find himself surrounded by fog. A moment later, he discovers a broken sword on the ground, and just as he picks it up, Minjun notices his sus presence and tells the demon to come out. As the blue Shrek obediently does so, Minjun is surprised to find how big it is and takes a fighting stance, wondering how the weaklings before him made it alive after facing this alien. Just then, the monster jumps at Minjun, and he barely dodges it before landing one of his chakra-infused punches. Surprisingly, this pest survives it and hurts Minjun's god complex, after which he kicks him some more. This bastard survives his kick too, making Minjun play his dirtier cards. He uses corruption to turn the ground into lava and hold the demon's leg, after which he violates him with punches. Just as he's hitting him, Minjun spots a glowing crease on his chest, which the demon defends with his life. As the goblin tries to punch him back, Minjun dodges it and realizes his thrift store jacket has been ripped. This triggers him and he picks up the broken sword and stabs the goblin in his weak spot, before finishing the whole ordeal with a kick. As the demon ends up back in hell, Minjun feasts upon his energy and unlocks yet another set of skills and AP. After this, he performs a post-mortem on the dead demon and finds a sus silver chip inside it. However, before he can pinpoint where he recognizes it from, another bunch of those pickle-nosed Shreks arrives and Minjun smirks, realizing he can test his newest long-range skill on them. With this, he unleashes his black arrows at them, which wipe out 2 of the 3 goblins in one go, leaving just the scaredy last one at Minjun's mercy. Just as the goblin realizes who the real demon among them is, Minjun asks him about his other friends, and he realizes he is as good as screwed. After wiping the floor with him, the ex-Dark Lord leaves the dungeon, flashing his brand new pair of lenses. The rest of his vacation wastes away in front of the computer, and when he returns to the military base, he finds all the clowns in his dorm growing a sob session over being summoned to the Tin Can dungeon. When D-Day arrives, Chulman instructs them to attack in groups from all sides, and rendezvous is in the center. However, just as Minjun and Co. are marching to the nearest hill, he senses an incoming attack. A herd of black balls comes at them with lightning-fast speed, and Chulman orders his troop to open fire at them. Minjun gets high on adrenaline and gets into position as the troops pop the balls like dollar store balloons. When only 3 of them remain, the troops get ready for close combat. Minji explains how these guys can suck big time and unalive you in the process, and Minjun realizes he can't let that happen since injured soldiers equal a lower overall score. With this, he plays the hero again and yeets one of those balls towards Sungo, and he shoots them down. He repeats the steps with the other 2 while the rest of the soldiers imagine how strong his leg game must be to be kicking so powerfully. Once all the balls have been popped, Chulman allows everyone a 10-minute break, and the soldiers all give their thumbs up to Minjun for what he did, including Guangxik's constipated ass. Later, as the clown duo curses its luck for being here right now, instead of their beds, one of them mentions how this Tin Can dungeon was a regular dungeon with a boss monster. However, the crazy jock, due from the Hunter Division, captured the boss alive to turn this into a training ground. Right then, Minji arrives to wipe their tears and bring their sorry selves back to the training. Later, as the troops march forward, they find the greatest surprise of their lives in the form of Du, who plans on playing their injured person. Meanwhile, the Asgardian minion from before meets up with a buff old man and shows him his broken dagger for repair, which suspiciously resembles the silver chip Minjun found from his previous post-mortem. On the other hand, as the battalion commanders from the other divisions discuss the threat level of the Tin Can dungeon, Junbium, Minjun's battalion leader arrives and asks where Du is. He panics upon learning he's out and about on his own at the training site, and the Sakamoto ripoff explains he just wanted to see a soldier with his 2 eyes. Back at the training site, everyone including Chulman feels their soul escaping their bodies, wondering why the battalion commander is playing the injured soldier, whom the troops have to carry. Just as he wonders how they'll carry his extra heavy ass, Minji suggests they'll do so on a stretcher. However, Du refuses the princess treatment and crumples the stretcher like it's a piece of paper. Later, as he spots Minjun in the crowd, he gives him a big ugly grin, and Minjun immediately matches his freak. As expected, the rest of the training passes like a walk in a park for Minjun as he slashes monsters and deals with natural hazards. Meanwhile, the others, including Chulman, get so tired that they struggle to eliminate a literal frog. As one of the weaklings almost loses consciousness, Minjun steps in as his guardian angel and unalives the toad in his stead. Later, the troops all work together to eliminate the monsters, while Du watches them from afar. As he does so, a clever toad sneaks up to him from behind, only to be sucker punched into oblivion. With his attention back on the game, he smirks at Minjun, realizing this guy has thoroughly impressed him. Meanwhile, the ladies are going through the same blackball slashing training on the other side of the field, including Eun-seo, who is carrying all the chicks on her back alone. After she defeats a herd of these makeshift balloons, one of her fangirls starts simping, behind whom a sneaky ball rises to land an attack. Eun-seo sacrifices her helmet to shove the dumb bitch away while she deals with the tiny demon herself, only to trip down the edge of a cliff. On the other hand, as the platoon takes another breather, Du, with his ever-suspicious and ugly grin, approaches this socially awkward Chulman and embarrasses his introverted existence with compliments. As he struggles to accept his praise and insists on sharing it with his incompetent soldiers, Du tells him to do his best until the end. Minji becomes his next innocent target, whom he holds in a deadlock and criticizes for his lack of res. Meanwhile, two side characters at the back discuss foals with one another, as one of them points at a do not disturb zone. The other explains how these holes are present all across large dungeons and basically connect 2 points in its space, so if somebody either falls into them or exits the dungeon's boundaries, they'd end up at a random point on the field via these holes. Suddenly, almost as if these guys jinxed it, the crowd gathers around in a circle, at the center of which Minjun finds Eun-seo unconscious. As the Sleeping Beauty returns to her senses and drinks some water, Chulman explains her situation to her battalion and informs her everyone in her platoon is alive and well, much to her relief. Minji then shows up and notices how upset she is about her broken foot and tells her she'd be practically useless now and will be transported as soon as the crew arrives, instead of being included in their training. Right then, Du sneaks up to them and Eun-seo acts as if she has seen a ghost and starts yapping about how she got here. Although Du isn't interested in her story at first, his interest multiplies when he recognizes her surname and realizes who her father is. As her Nepo card strikes again, he asks if she's Sun Taeho's daughter. She nods her head, only to receive the badge of the injured as a result. After this, he frantically looks around for somebody buff and Minjun's ugly face catches his attention. Just as Eun-seo blushes at the sight of his simp-worthy existence, Du calls him up and tells him to pick her up, princess style. He initially mentions how fan service wasn't part of his job description, but realizes that Du is about to blow his fuse any second now. He takes this as a hint and says he'll settle for a piggyback ride for a pig such as her, which she reluctantly accepts. As Eun-seo suffers from the embarrassment of riding Minjun's psychotic ass, Minji sneaks up to Du and calls him out on the favoritism show he just put on. However, he dismisses it and reveals that he has some personal grudge against Taeho instead of love and respect. Later, as Eun-seo continues her journey on Minjun's back, along with all the protocol surrounding her, she feels embarrassed and tries to play the good girl by asking Minjun to let her down if he feels tired. This dimwit compares her to Stedel and says she's pretty lightweight. Even more embarrassed, she changes the topic and promises to repay him. Minjun, being the unapologetically shameless that he is, says he'll take it, especially if it comes from her father. This causes them to banter once again, which Minji and Du watch from afar and become their #1 shippers. At night, as the tired soldiers barely march up to the conclusion point, Chulman keeps them going with his useless pep talks and motivational speeches, while the others curse Du for turning their basic training into hell. Right then, one of the soldiers spots some Quidditch snitches approaching them from up above, which makes Chulman wonder if they've ended up in the wrong verse. On a closer look, it turns out they are small but nasty demons, ready to crash right into the troops. As Du observes this scene from afar, he realizes how clever these skunks are for using the darkness as their cover. Meanwhile, the troops struggle to fend them off, thanks to their weak asses and also the dark, which Du believes won't qualify as a valid point and will still result in point deduction. Minju realizes how deep into trouble he is, but also that there's nothing he can do about it since he can't leave his post. While this guy decides to trust Chulman, Minjun loses his patience and runs up to Chulman with Unseo on his back and suggests him some top-notch scheme to fend off the demons. Although this guy isn't really sure about his reckless plan, seeing how obsessed he is with his points, he allows him to do as he pleases. As the birds begin to charge at them again, Chulman orders everyone to get behind Minjun while he asks Unseo to hold on tight to him. As she reluctantly wraps herself all around him, he pulls out his gun and infuses the bullets with his black arrows. On top of being wildly overpowered, he also has the eyes of a dark mage with built-in night vision, which helps him shoot right at the birds while his arrows increase the offense range. His first attack hit the bullseye, making Unseo gape like an idiot in awe. Meanwhile, Minjun unleashes another set of bullets and slaughters another batch, making it known that he, out of everyone else, is built completely different. How long will Minjun need to take over the entire world? Comment fried chicken over chicks for part 2. Leave a thumbs up if you liked the video and subscribe to the channel for similar content. And as always,